Good afternoon, everybody. As we are going through this Holy Week, today is what we call Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday. And this is the day that we remember Jesus having what we call the Last Supper with his disciples before he is arrested and tried and ultimately executed by his crucifixion. Just a little, just want to spend a little time just talking about uh, the Last Supper and some of its origins and meanings and what took place during that time. First of all, so you can really call this Monday, Thursday 101 class if you want to. And I'm really talking and with the children, uh, and but everyone is welcome to listen and learn as well. When Jesus was having the Last Supper, or when the Last Supper was going on, they were celebrating the feast or the festival known as Passover. And that is a Jewish festival, very important Jewish festival. Matter of fact, I would say is the most important Jewish festival and feast of the year. It's very important. Now, what is Passover? Passover is the holiday in which our Jewish sisters and brothers remember the last night that the Hebrews spent in Egypt before they were freed. As you remember in the story of Moses and the Pharaoh, the God had sent a number of plagues to Egypt because Pharaoh was not letting the Hebrew people go. He turned the water into blood. There were frogs, there were locusts, but still the Pharaoh was not letting the people go. Finally, as a last resort, God warned everyone that the last plague would be the worst. And that plague was the plague of the firstborn, in which every firstborn, Egyptian, Hebrew, even animal, would be killed during the night when a ghost or spirit came through. Now, God told the Hebrew people, or through Moses, that the way to stay safe from their firstborn not being killed during the night was to take some lamb's blood and put it on top of their doorway. And so when the ghost or the cloud, if you've seen the movie The Ten Commandments, it's like a fog or something that goes through. For those who didn't have the lamb's blood over the top of their door, their firstborn son was killed, which included the Pharaoh. But if you had this lamb's blood on top of the door, that spirit of death would pass over your house. And so all the Hebrew people were spared that horrible plague because the spirit passed over their house. And that is ultimately when Pharaoh gave up and said, "Go, leave." And the people left. They left so quickly that they had not had time for their bread to rise. They had set their bread out to rise, but they didn't have enough time because they had to get out of town, out of Egypt very quickly. And so this is a very important holiday because that's when the people remember when they were freed from the hands of the Pharaoh and God delivered them out of the hands of the Egyptians. Now, so they have a very special meal every year, a Passover meal, in which there are certain things to do, certain things to eat, certain things to drink. And it is called a Seder meal, which is a time of remembering all the things that took place during the time the Hebrews were in Egypt. Now I have for you just a very basic plate or template of what goes on, what goes on the plate and during the Seder meal. And I will go through each of those for you. First of all, there is what is called mara, or a bitter herb. Okay? Any bitter herb, though horseradish is the most common. Have you ever had horseradish? It's just nasty. It's very bitter, and it brings tears to the eyes, and which is a symbol of recalling the bitterness of the Egyptians' slavery. The Seder refers to the slavery in Egypt, but people are called to look at their own bitter enslavements, which we call sin. And then there is what is called kareset, and that is a sweet salad that is made, and I've done this before, with apple, nuts, wine, and cinnamon, and it's used to represent mortar. Mortar is like the glue used by the Hebrew slaves to make bricks. And then there is karpas. Karpas is a green vegetable, usually parsley. Okay? Parsley. While karpas may symbolize the freshness of spring, others say people eat it to make them feel like they're kings or queens, nobility. Some families still use boiled potatoes for karpas, which was an older tradition. And then there is a second herb called kareset or kazeret, which is a second bitter herb, most often romaine lettuce, but people often use the leafy greens of the horseradish or carrot plant. And that is also to represent the bitterness of slavery. Salt water, okay? Salt water symbolizes the tears and the sweat of all of those who were in slavery through their hard work and the tears that they cried. And it is traditional to begin the Seder meal with each person eating a hard-boiled egg. And there's a space for the hard-boiled egg like everything else. Not a roasted egg, but a hard-boiled egg dipped in the bowl of salt water. And sometimes you also dip the parsley in the salt water as well. Now, the matzah, and we like matzah around here, matzah is perhaps the most important symbol of the Seder meal. And it is a plate that there are three pieces of matzah put on. And it's typically covered with a cloth. People have come up with many interpretations for the three pieces of matzah. But the matzah is a symbol of the unleavened bread. Remember, it didn't rise. Why? Because they had to get out of town very quickly. So they didn't have time. So the unleavened bread, or matzah bread, is used to remember that. And there's lots of things during the meal that our Jewish sisters and brothers do, that games and stuff about the matzah. There is also different times when you drink either juice or wine. Usually it's wine, and there are 4 cups. And the 4 cups represent the redemption. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you from the slavery, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment, and I will take you to me for a people. Others say that the 4 cups represent the 4 letters in the unspeakable name of God, Yahweh, YHWH. Now, also, it is very important to remember that at each Seder meal, there is always a cup set for Elijah. And I have an Elijah cup that was given to me as a gift, and it comes from Jerusalem. But the Elijah cup is always filled. Matter of fact, at every Seder meal, there is a plate of food that would have all of the food on it, and a cup, with a cup for Elijah, in case Elijah decides to return. And because they were looking for the coming of Elijah. So when Christians do a Seder meal, or we Christians observe a Seder meal, we also have a cup for Elijah, but we also set a cup for Jesus as well. Many different versions of the Seder meal, and they're a lot of fun, and we'll probably do one next year or so. But this is important because Jesus and his disciples were doing the Seder meal, the Passover meal, okay? During what we call this Maundy Thursday. And Jesus was following all the stuff, all the things that he was supposed to be doing and that everyone would do during a Seder meal. And then he took the bread. Okay, he took the matzah. And he said something different. And it called everyone off by guard. Instead of the things he would say about the matzah, Jesus lifted the bread and said, "This is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And the disciples went, What did he say? That's not part of the script. It's not what you're supposed to be saying. But they did as they were told, and each took a piece of bread and they ate it. And then Jesus took the cup, probably the Elijah cup, at the head of the table, and said, "This is my body, which is poured out for you." And again, that's not part of the script. It's not part of the script. This is about Elijah coming back. And remember, in the story of the Transfiguration, you remember when Jesus went up to the mountain and became white, and all of a sudden Elijah and Moses showed up? Hey, that was getting us ready for this Passover meal in which Jesus turned it into Holy Communion. And so Jesus said, "This is my body which is broken, blood which is shed for you. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." And so they drank from their cup, saying, what does this mean? They didn't understand, but they would later understand, because what Jesus was doing was getting the disciples ready for his crucifixion and what would take place. That Peter would deny him, Judas would betray him, he would be arrested, and he would be ultimately crucified. So that's what we do on this Maundy Thursday. We remember the Last Supper, and we remember those events that will lead to all the events that take place on Good Friday. Now, usually when there is a Maundy Thursday service, there is a time for Holy Communion. Well, we find ourselves in a very odd time right now because of the coronavirus, in which we cannot take communion or observe Holy Communion like we would like to together as the body of Christ or as a church. Now, some people are finding ways to do that, and some churches are still having communion. Some have done drive-by communion, and where they get the prepackaged stuff, and some are doing it through the computer, and that is fine. That is fine. But one group has come up, and this service that I found is from the United Methodists from New Jersey. Their conference is the Greater New Jersey Conference. Instead of being able to have bread and juice or wine, we are going to do something a little different. Now, we're going to do something that is called the Love Feast. And the liturgy should be posted on Facebook if you want to go through it. As you look at this post, that liturgy is there for you to look. Now, the people of New Jersey say pastors and those who lead our communities must be commended for the ways in which they are maintaining community through this difficult time. Many of our pastors are finding ways to pray, preach, teach, and counsel the faithful as we together yet physically separate face this pandemic. Others have been trying to find additional ways to extend the grace of God through online worship at the church with their communities, and the Love Feast may serve that purpose. Okay, what is the Love Feast, you say? The Love Feast is a meal celebrating fellowship and unity while remembering the meals that Jesus shared with the disciples during his ministry, especially the Last Supper. John Wesley, who was the person who started the Methodist movement, experienced the Love Feast with a religious group by the name of Moravians. Moravians were German people who later became Lutherans and other types of denominations. And so he experienced his first Love Feast with these Moravians in 1737, and John Wesley wrote in his diary, "After evening prayers, we joined the Germans in one of their Love Feasts. It was begun and ended with thanksgiving and prayer, and celebrated in so decent and solemn a manner as a Christian of the apostolic age would have allowed to be worthy of Christ. The Love Feast is celebrated especially in times when celebrating communion is deemed inappropriate, particularly when no one is physically present who is qualified to minister the sacrament. This time, since we're not able to be together and to have communion as we always do, we celebrate the Love Feast." And as I said on Sunday, when John Wesley was starting the movement, John Wesley would have groups called societies, and they were not to be the church. They were kind of a movement to energize the church. But they would gather and they would have these Love Feasts. They weren't going to have communion because John Wesley wanted them to go to church to have communion. So we are going to do this feast now, and it's called a Love Feast for Sheltering in Place. And the liturgy is there on the Facebook page that John posted, and thank you for John for posting. Thank you, Catherine, for filming, by the way. So I will do that. We have been asked to shelter in place to keep one another safe, for this is an act of communal grace. The Lord has not left us, nor forsaken us. In divine love, we are held securely. We are not alone. We are still together, united by our prayers and our witness of hope before the world. You are the one who has loved each of us before the world began. Even now, we are all being held in the security of loving arms. You are attentive to our every prayer, and through these prayers you have knitted us together. You are aware of our needs before they revealed at our horizon, and have begun to act before we know to cry out. Keep us attentive to the needs around us, so you might illuminate your gracious presence through our acts of kindness. Amen. And now, let me sing to you verses 1 and 2 of Yet and Are We Yet Alive? And then 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 will be added later during the service. This is one of Charles Wesley's main hymns, and it's always sung at annual conference. And are we yet alive I better not sing it. I'm out of tune already. So let's just say it. And are we yet alive to wish each other grace? Glory and thanks to Jesus give for his almighty grace. Preserved by power divine to full salvation here, again in Jesus' praise we join and in his sight appear. And now let me read to you Psalm 46, but it will be in haiku version. And you know what a haiku is? It is a poem type of version. God is our refuge, our help in time of trouble. So we shall not fear. Not when our world shakes, nor when the mountains tumble down into the sea. Waves crash and they foam. The surging sea continue to shake the mountains. The river channels will bring joy to God's city, a holy dwelling. Our God lives in it, a city that can't be moved. God has rescued it. Our nations still roar as they seem to come and go when God gives a shout. The earth is dissolved. Know that the Lord is on our side. God is our stronghold. So come, bear witness, our God devastates the earth. Bring end to our wars, shattering the bow and breaking all our spears. Stop all your striving. Recognize that I am God. God commands us all. I will be placed first. I am to be exalted over everything. The Lord's on our side. God is our only stronghold, the God of Jacob. And verses 3 and 4 of Yet and Are We Yet Alive? What troubles have we seen? What mighty conflicts past? Fightings without and fears within, since we assembled last. Yet out of all the Lord hath brought us by his love, and still he doth his help afford, and hides our life above. And so we come to the time where we have the bread, and you can use whatever kind of bread that you've got. I don't have any matzah here, but usually it's unleavened bread, but you can use whatever. So I have a Hawaiian sweet roll. And I will say, the Lord be with you, and you will say, and also with you. And this is the grace. Be present at our table, Lord. Be here and everywhere adored. Thy creatures bless and grant that we may feast in paradise with thee. Amen. And so, You will go around in your household, whether you're one person or two or how many, and you will take a piece of the bread and you will eat it. And instead of having the grape juice for like Holy Communion, you can pass around a glass of water or a cup of water, or have a pitcher of water and pour different people's cups, and to remember the water. Jesus, remember, telling us that he is the living water. And so we do that. And then the last verses of "And are we yet alive? Then let us make our boast of his redeeming power, which saves us to the uttermost. Till we can sin no more, let us take up the cross, till we the crown obtain, and gladly beckon all things lost, so we may Jesus gain. Before I have the blessing, I hope you've enjoyed this, except for the singing part, which scared me and Catherine and all the neighbors as well. But I hope you enjoyed the service, and this time. Tomorrow, I'm going to post just a little bit, not really a service, but talking about some of the things that Jesus said from the cross, the 7 last words of the cross. And I won't go through all 7 of those, but it's just some of the things that sometimes we misinterpret, and when Jesus actually meant it another way. So look for that tomorrow. So let us end with a blessing. May the Lord bless you wherever you are. May you find comfort in the eternal love of God, who was and is to come. May the hope you embrace be the hope you share until we see each other's face. Amen and amen. May the peace of Christ be with you all. Amen.